Okay, thank you for that. I just want to introduce a few people before I turn it over. So I'm Gina Young. I'm the director of the East Maui Water Authority. I'd like to introduce my staff. I have Corey Vicens with me, who's my secretary and also my deputy director. She does everything. Serena Fukushima is our information and education specialist who started going on 3 weeks ago. And then we have Leslie Tamarabuchi, who's our grant coordinator over there. And then I'd also like to thank my board members for coming today. Let me see who's closest. We have Sissy Latham, or if you could, there we go. Thank you. We have Moses Bergau in the back, who is our Nahiku. And then we have, where did Bush get off to? Martin, right there. Thank you very much. Harry Hueo, right there. Thank you. We have Lynn Scott. And am I missing anybody? Okay, great. And then I'm going to turn it over to two people. Like I say on my slide, we wouldn't be here without the long, hard work of this community. So I just want to say thank you, first of all, for everything. And I'd like to open our meeting, turn it over to Mahealani Went and her husband, Ed, and have them say a few words.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. Actually, I was asked if I would sort of provide a legal framework. I had no idea that one of our Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation attorneys joined you on your hokai. Otherwise, I would have corralled her and made her do this. I'm not ma to making presentations. I haven't done it in a long time. So I don't want to take up too much time. We have a lot of important work to do. But I I did want to start with something that we don't usually talk about in the context of Keanae Wailua Nui and the East Maui water struggles. And that is some early cases from the 70s that went through the 90s. And it was kind of laughable because there was these two sugar plantations on the island of Kauai, where I'm from. And in fact, my dad is a heavy equipment operator, and he worked for one of them, McBride Sugar. And Gay Robinson was the other plantation. And they had both acquired Ili Kupono in the Ahupua'a of, or land district of Hanapepe. And these two sugar plantations were fighting with each other over who owned the water, because they were ripping each other off, suing each other left and right. And there were a series of cases, and it took pretty much 20 years to resolve it. It ended up, I think there were 4 major cases. They call these cases the Robinson cases. It ended up with Chief Justice William Richardson saying, hey, neither of you guys own it. The water is a public trust resource. It's for all of the people. His decision was a little bit different than what is our traditional and customary practice, which is exactly that. It's a public resource. The decision still allowed diversions out of the watershed, which were not permitted or practiced during traditional times. So given that sort of framework, our current water law is sort of built on that. So still in that period in 1978, we know that we haven't had a constitutional convention since then. In Hawaii, we used to have them every 10 years. The last one was in 1978. And in 1978, There are certain constitutional amendments that were proposed and passed by the people of Hawaii. Some of them affirmed our traditional and customary rights, Native traditional customary rights, and another one affirmed what Chief Justice Richardson held in the Robinson case, which is that water was a public trust resource that was held for the benefit of all the people of Hawaii. It took about 10 years for a water code to be enacted, which sort of enshrined and encapsulated all of these principles and created the Commission on Water Resources Management. And one of the things is sort of not practiced in every state, in every jurisdiction, but in Hawaii, the Commission on Water Resources Management was an agency placed within a state department under the executive branch. And so when it first came into being, they went around the islands and they asked people to come forward and make declarations about what their use of the waters were. They also, I guess for practical reasons, established the in-stream flows at whatever it was happening at that time, so status quo. And if you wanted to change it, you had to apply for what they call to set interim in-stream water flows. So by that time in East Maui, all of the waters were like almost 100% diverted. And this community had begun in around the mid-'80s, agitating for return of the water. They didn't do it as an organized community. There were a few individuals who stepped forward. The organization that I was employed by, the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation, represented these individuals. Some of them are very venerable kupuna to us. I mean, all of them are. Some of them are still with us. But Uncle Harry is the best known of them. Under his leadership, they began this. Now, I think it was 1986 when the last of 4 leases, long-term leases or licenses, which gave Alexander and Baldwin permission to divert the waters expired. That was in 1986. It was in 1987 that the individuals from this community stepped forward and with the assistance of Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation filed to enjoin the DLNR from awarding this lease. From 1986 to today, no long-term lease has ever been awarded. And I think that that was a great accomplishment. Sometimes we forget, because this actually predated Namoko. They did a historic thing back then, because the issuance of these long-term leases was just a matter of routine. It was rubber stamped all of those years. So that issue is before us. It's very relevant to the East Maui Water Authority, because currently Mahipono, which is kind of like stand-in for EMI and A&B, has pending a lease application for a long-term license to continue those diversions. It will either have those leases approved, or, I mean, as we see it in the community, the East Maui Water Authority will take over management. It's either one or the other. If there are discussions about some sort of hybrid, I, as a community member, am unaware of that. I will say that we know that this community fought long and hard a torturous legal battle, more than one, that went on for like 30, 40 years, from the mid-'80s all the way up to almost to the present. There were 2 major issues that were before the courts and, subject to the legal processes. The first was to return the waters, and that would be accomplished by setting interim in-stream flows for our community. So in 2001, the kupuna of this community organized and decided that as stewards of Ko'olaumoko, they would ask that all of the streams within the moko be returned and restored. So 27 petitions were filed, or applications, before the Commission on Water Resources Management. Now, I'm going to brag a little bit here. I personally filed those 27 petitions. It's something I'm really, really proud of, because our staff attorneys really did the hard work, but I, as an administrator with the organizations, I did that, and I'm really, really happy, and I'm just proud that I played that role with it. That did not, so those, the quorum experience, and my husband will tell you all about it, it was really grueling, it was torturous. The quorum is an agency within the executive branch. In order to appeal a decision, or even to have the right to file an application, you have to have standing. And quorum repeatedly, and the department within which it is housed, the Department of Land and Natural Resources, the Board of Land and Natural Resources, repeatedly denied standing to this community to even file or bring any sort of grievance if they were unhappy with its decision. So no matter what proceeding came before these agencies, the DLNR and as well as quorum, there was resistance. And justice delayed is justice denied, and that's exactly what happened with this community. It took 30 years before a decision was finally rendered, and we got, a historic return of the waters of East Maui. But the process of quorum involved contested case hearings before the agency, appeals to the circuit court, more appeals to the intermediate court, some appeals to the Supreme Court, and up and down that ladder of judicial process. So it was really, really rigorous, and it was really difficult for our community. The second major legal issue, was this practice of issuing so-called temporary revocable permits in lieu of the long-term licenses that they were not able to get. And the reason why the DLNR stopped issuing those long-term, they were stopped by our community, is because A and B was required in order to get, as a condition of being awarded a long-term license, had to do an environmental impact statement. Now, can you imagine them saying there's no impacts after you dry out 27 major streams in East Maui? No, it was very, very challenging. So they never did to this day. I think there's something, perhaps they have an application pending now, but from 1986 until this day, no long-term license or lease has been awarded. That process of disputing that practice of issuing these so-called temporary, that went on for decades, these temporary short-term or revocable permits, was challenged every step of the way by Namoko. And at every step of the way, there were delays. Many delays. They had this reason and that reason. Oh, we're going to wait till quorum makes its decision. Quorum would make the decision. The decision was not a good decision. We would appeal it. Oh, we can't, make a decision about this because the other one is pending. That sort of thing was going on too. So, what happens when justice is delayed and denied? People die. The corporation's life is perpetual, but the people, they pass on. The kalo dies. the generations who would have had that opportunity to learn the skills of their kupuna, they have no choice. They have to walk away. They have to find other ways to survive. So you lose the generational knowledge, you lose the kalo species, you lose, the lands are overgrown because you're not actively cultivating it. You lose your kupuna, who have all that wisdom and who have been the foundation, who drove this battle. All of that. It's a great loss that this community suffered. So those, I think, are the two major legal efforts by Namoku. I don't mention, and Lucienne knows all about this, that when we finally got a decision from the courts saying that those temporary, so-called revocable permits were illegal, A&B ran to the legislature and asked the legislature to pass a law that would a holdover permits, pass a law that would sort of be an end around or overrule what the courts had decided. It was very contentious, and I remember, because Lucienne guys were there, we were there. I think there were like at least 2,000 people who submitted testimonies opposing this House Bill 2501, but they passed it anyway. I think they asked for X number of years, but the legislature gave them 3. At the end, that was supposed to buy them time to do the EIS to satisfy the requirements of applying for the long-term lease. 3 years went by, they were back at the legislature asking for 10 years holdover. And that second effort was not successful, thank goodness. And so the COWRM setting of in-stream flows was concluded without dispute in 2018. The other one about the short-term leases and short-term revocable permits was finally decided by the Supreme Court in 2022, I think. And Lucia knows all of this stuff too. So with that, I'm going to conclude. The historic, vote by the people of Maui to create the East Maui Water Authority is why we're here. We're hoping that it all works out. We're a little bit wary because it's like we have a precious resource over here and everybody wants it. So it's kind of, concerning. But I'm gonna, please come, my husband. Rescue me. Thank you.
Aloha. We couldn't have done this alone. And Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation played a big role in this. And I want to say to you, Lucienne, and the Sierra Club, thank you very much. Because in the early years when we first were organizing, I talked to Lucienne and I said to her, maybe together we can take down the giant. And we did. Mahalo, Lucienne. Our community, as Maya expressed, we went through hell. Our community is based on kupuna wisdom, kupuna mana'o. But those days, we all were younger, and they were older, and they shared the knowledge to us. And that's why we came up with 27 streams and rivers. We here, in this Aupa'au, Keanae, and Wailuanui, and the Hana people. They know what the Ko'olau is all about. The Ko'olau of East Maui is crown lands, set aside by our ali'i. When Kalakaua, King Kalakaua at that time, allowed Alexander and Baldwin to create the ditch system, in this law, and that law still exists, it was in our court case too, do not harm the people below. We were harmed. Totally dried out. Everything died. Everything. To the O'opo, to the Hi'iwai, to the Opai, and our huli. We were left with nothing. So when Uncle Harry passed away, he initiated the case with Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation. One river, Wai'okamilo. Well, Wai'okamilo goes dry when there's no rain. And out here, you give it 1 week, the rivers will dry out. A lot of them will. And springs. So the lawyers got a hold of us. They heard that we were organizing. We wanted to do something. So they asked me, they got a hold of me and they asked me what we're gonna do. So I took it back to the attention and we had it at Nalani's house, Ka'awamo and Francis meeting. The kupuna pulled out the map, and the map stated Crown Lands, Ko'olau. They say identify the streams and rivers. And the 27 streams and rivers are located in the Ko'olau. And that's how it started, the 27 streams and rivers. We were victorious. 27 streams and rivers were released. Some at 90%, and 10 is at 100%. I recommend to the Water Authority, these 10 streams should not be touched. It should stay in its prior conditions at 100%. If we think and talk about the future generation, we cannot just only talk. We gotta do the walk. We realize water is so precious. We realize, and we always have realized, everybody needs water. We wasn't here to fight everybody. Our fight was against Alexander and Baldwin and nobody else. Not the people of upcountry, nor the farmers, anybody. We was not against you. We were fighting for survival of our way of life. A traditional and customary rights, a rights to gather, which is our protected in our constitutional rights. Everything we did was within the law. We never even fired a shot. We never even lifted a hand to anybody. We ate the humble pie. And for those of you who don't know the humble pie, it's sour. Well, now we're in this situation. We have Mahipono, who is a Canadian operation out of Canada, a foreign country. And the water authority that has been established by the county of Maui. We had to make a choice also. I choose the Water Authority over a Canadian firm from another country managing our resources. Earlier I said it is Crown lands. It is still Crown lands. We cannot just give it away. We must use wisdom, knowledge. How and will we be able to provide resources to wherever it has to go on the other side of the island? Remember, every water meter that is issued, every stream diverted for the water meters will never ever be returned to the streams and rivers, because all man needs water. So we need to walk lightly, tread lightly, but be wise. We need to fix the system. We need to prepare to have reservoirs on the other side. When it rains, fill them up. Global warming is for real. It's happening. It don't rain out here anymore like it used to. There's big changes. Many of you who have children, I know you love them. You want them to survive here. We don't want to see no more people packing up and moving out. But again, how are we going to do this without impacting the ko'olau? And every stream diverted affects native rights. So there's a fine line, a very fine line to walk. And it's going to take all of us. I have high respects for Lucianne in the years that she has done in protecting our fragile environment, Mother Earth. And we need to continue to protect Mother Earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Mihailani. I'm just going to give an update on where the Water Authority is, tell you a little bit about who we are. So I think you all know in 2022 we had an election, and it was a charter amendment passed by you folks. And let me turn it this way. So we're now housed in the county, which is pretty incredible if you think about it. So we have all the county resources, and we have a mission that's written right in the charter. I introduced my staff here so you can see we're small, but we're mighty, and we're growing, and our board helps tremendously with knowledge and resources. And we're going to be growing more than what we have. We have water resource specialists coming, some intern positions, and then we're going to start doing watershed work. Sometime we hope to hire in the spring and come out and get in the watershed. Our independent community board, 11 invaluable experts. They give us guidance on water policy, and they give us area knowledge. And that's our members here that are here tonight. They help us integrate the cultural perspective. And you can see it, they changed the name right away, which was a really good way to start. And they did a motto for us, which reflects how precious this water is. It literally reflects the fact that it comes from the heavens down into the bowl, and it's literally heaven's tears, and it's this precious resource that we need to protect and sustain. And then it's the communities. We really need to be guided by you folks out here that know the conditions, the challenges, that hold the ancestral knowledge, and we want to support you. We're also working to bring all the communities together. In the past, they've been pitted against each other, and we really want to build our power. All these communities have been affected directly by a lack of water. And what we really, Ed and Mahealani alluded to this, we really want to replace this old system of water extraction that really ignores the communities and the impact. We don't want to replace one landlord for another. So what we want to do is we want to create a new system that's mutually beneficial, that has awareness of the community, that acknowledges what's happened. We're looking at it from a Ho'oponopono Kea'aina community concept, where we acknowledge the past, where we create community benefits, and we've hired Kumupono Kepamali, Onaunamali, to help us with historic knowledge. They did interviews of Kapuna in the area. They were born between 1910 and 1930, and that's going to bring a lot of useful information. We want to promote equitable distribution. We want to meet the needs of the community. We want to find ways to build capacity. DWS is working on that part, lowering the cost of delivery. We want to recognize the benefits of meeting community water needs and the community's role in food production. There's a lot of food that's grown out here, and I don't think people understand that. So we are working with the Department of Ag on their food security plan to try to quantify that and really help people understand. We want to promote food security, and we want local communities that can build for their ohanas, so everybody can stay on Maui and we don't continue this exodus of people out of their communities. We want to provide island-wide economic benefits that recycle money through our island economy, and we want to create long-term island water security. And I think if anybody is paying attention to what's happening in Lahaina, you can see what's on the forefront. Climate change, trying to balance housing needs with tourism and luxury development, and just a really inefficient state regulatory system. We're looking at responsible management. Ed alluded to reservoirs, reservoir lining, dealing with climate risk. So our mission is written right in the charter, that we're to obtain local control of surface water in East Maui, and that we're to do a watershed plan and watershed work. So what have we been doing on that? I came on in November. I was, we're working with our board. I was sworn in on November 6th, and November 8th, I was before the DLNR, where they had put a 30-year water license right on the agenda. So Mayor Bisson intervened, sent a letter, really had our backs, and they said, okay, we'll give you some time to get organized. Next month, they put the annual permit back on. Backing up to October, they tried to do it before the Water Authority was even established, and it was really this community that came out to the Water Authority Board and really got them to back off at this point. We're in negotiations with Mahipono, but we're not very far along. Things have just started. We want to come back out to the community and have something to talk to you about. And I want to bring out our board chair and our vice chair too, so we can get information from you and give you information, but we don't really have any right now. And we've been trying to work with the DLNR and the BLNR, but they have their own issues too. A lot has been thrown on their plate. They're in Honolulu, and they have a long history, and it's sometimes hard to refocus people's perspectives around things when they've been involved with it for a long time. So one of the most interesting things that came out of the meeting in December was that the BLNR asked that this group that been meeting with Mahipono be taken over by the county, and that's the Interim Committee of East Maui Stakeholders. So we meet monthly. If anybody's interested, come talk to me about sitting in on the meetings. And it's great because Mahipono's on the meetings, so they get to hear the community perspective. So the first time ever, we talked about their farm plan. And it was really interesting for them to hear the perspective of the people. And I mean, their answer was, we're in compliance to the questions, but the people on the meeting tried to educate them on what's behind being in compliance. And I think that's the discussion that we need to be having. The group is really interested in rainfall data and climate change and how dealing with that. So we've had some experts. Chris Schuler presented to us, and that was excellent. And then we came up with this idea. Everybody wants to hear from Kapuna, and we decided maybe not do it in those meetings, but open it up to the public. So now that I have Serena, she'll work with me on trying to spin off a series where maybe quarterly we have a meeting that's recorded with some Kapuna, and they can share their knowledge and what they want for the future generations. So the discussions, we're early on. There's not talk of a hybrid. I know it's hard when you don't know what's happening and you just hear things, but we hope to come back out so that we can talk about what's going on. But in order to even get anywhere, we needed to just get the discussions going. They're led by the mayor, which is great. So he gets everybody in there. We're partnering with DWS. They're also in there. And we're trying to bring historical awareness and the need for equitable outcomes into that discussion. And that's a brand new discussion, too. So we're doing our best with that. And we'll come back out and get your input. The legal side, we're working to understand the state system legal side, and we're working on the political side, and that's part of why we're here, so we can keep it. We can't do this without you folks. And we'll come out to you when we need your help. It'll be the end of the year. So, you know, I say what got us here will lead to future success. And that's part of what these meetings are, to get your input. So what else do we do? We're going to start doing some watershed work, and we need to come up with a plan that the board approves, and then each year they look at the implementation and they approve all that as well. We have some money from the county council to do that, so we're very happy about that. It's going to serve as a foundational document to get grants also, so there'll be a lot of descriptive information in there about the culture of the community, and then also we're going to use it for programs to find out what are the community's priorities. And it's going to be culturally rooted and community-based. That's our goal. And we want to focus on the lower elevations. I know right now you have DLNR that's up at the top, but we really want to focus on the lower areas that affect the community the most. And we're going to have to partner with everybody else out there, and we know that too. And we're excited about that. It is really a team effort. So here we are, we're building out a watershed division. We're right in the beginning. We hope to partner with the community to do a base yard, and we'll talk about that over the next year. And then I just wanted to remind people what our limited scope is. As you're giving your community engagement, we really have a very narrow focus of East Maui surface water. And it's really just to bring the raw water to DWS and to other users, whatever agricultural operation, mahi pono. So that's an important piece of the whole discussion. We're not DWS. We don't do treatment. We don't do alternate water sources, which is good. We can be very focused on our one goal. Okay, so what is this all about? These meetings, we're doing 4 meetings over the next 3 days. It's really to go out to the communities, and tomorrow I'll let Kula know what came out of this meeting, and then I'll let Haiku know. But I did get, and we're going to do a bond financing session for policymakers tomorrow online at 11, if anybody's interested in technical knowledge. And then I did want to give you a little bit of history with what the community is. Cool has already done some community engagement, and I think it would make you feel good to know kind of what their community engagement has already been. It's already been wanting a cultural perspective. It's been Aloha Aina. I think for tomorrow night I'll change how the slides come up. I was playing around with different ways. So this is Kula's already talking about, you know, land stewardship, and we can fold that into our plan. It's very similar from what I've heard from out here. And then the water infrastructure too. It's important to pretty much every community and improving the infrastructure. And then Haiku has also had the same thing, but each community is different. So Haiku, their watershed is also invasive. And they've also had a lot of community trauma over the time. So we'll probably work on reforestation with them in their area as well. And we have a board member from there. So tonight's meeting, I'm going to turn it over to our experts that are here. I want to introduce Lourdes German. Is from the Public Finance Initiative. And they reached out to us. They help governments and other organizations to embed values and to really make things right. So let me.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Gina. Oh, hello. Thank you. It's such a privilege to be here with you. As Gina said, my name is Lourdes, and I'm the Executive Director of the Public Finance Initiative. And we are a nonprofit organization that really believes that in order to think about how you fund the future of places, you can actually have a place-based lens. You can believe in the values that are important to community, and you can realize them by using public finance strategically rather than thinking that the finance piece can be in tension with those goals. And we stepped into your living classroom today with so much humility and a desire to not just share what we know and what we think could be helpful, but also to learn from you. And that's the reason we're beginning tonight's event with a community engagement session. And before that, I want to acknowledge members of our team. So if you could each stand, and some of our experts, you're going to hear from them and some of their backgrounds, but Peter Hamlin, Alex Grun, Katie Hansen, Andrew Simmons, Dr. Caroletta Chief, Tiffany Lee, here just to make sure that we can hopefully put on a program that really centers your voice and helps you not just shape the future of what could happen here, but really tell us what is your hope for path. So with that, I'll ask you to please go to our slide deck. And we'll tell you what we're going to do. But instead, let me grab my glasses. If you could put it full screen. Yeah. Yeah, if you just make it full screen, you'll be able to see the whole thing. Maybe like, yeah, I don't know. Sorry, a little technical difficulties, but there we go. There we go. Yeah, we're gonna have you moving around the room and breaking up shortly. And I know that we're just eager to really get you in the weeds of these discussions. So I'll go through this is just a little bit about who we are. We are also a tiny but mighty team, as you saw, but we've done work with over 476 communities just in the past 3 years across 46 states. And they're all what we call the cohort of the willing, people who really believe that you don't just fund things and balance the balance sheet and think about dollars and cents, but that you can actually bring change that's positive in community across all the issues that I know you care about and so many others. And again, these are team members who are also not here joining us today. But the goal of our interactive exercise is to listen, learn, and hear from you. And with Gina, and I also want to acknowledge Lucien, Ed, and Mehlani, who have been so incredible in not just teaching us so much before we got here, but also reviewing materials. We've come up with 4 different sets of questions. And part of what we want to do is break you up into 4 groups. So where you see table tent, and if a member of my team could raise them, that's what they look like. You're going to get to choose which topic is most near and dear to your heart, which topic is the one that you really want to dig into. And they cover vision and values. And just an example of what you'll talk about is, what is your future vision for the waters? Community benefits and rates is group 2. What does your community need to thrive? And how can we think about sharing with Gina what could be your conception of community benefit focused projects in order to really help that agenda be driven forward with your voice? Third, oral history. What are your memories? What's important for future generations to understand about the system? And then fourth, management and jobs. Who should manage the watershed? What are some of the specific job or tasks and tactics that are important to think about, and who should do them? And at the end, we're going to come out and do a quick report out so that we hear everybody's perspective and some reflections from Gina. And then we're going to go in and tell you, how do we think you could hold a vision for what we talk about in this room and bring that forward with awareness of how you can fund it, how you can think about indigenous cultural rights, how you can think about the issues of risk that we've talked about, including climate change, resilience, and others, and how do you center community voice and power in that equation as best as we can with the time we have. So any questions about the instructions? All right. Which table is group 1? Could somebody raise their hand from the team? So that's group 1, group 2, group 3, and group 4. All right, so please pick a place, and then we will spend 20 minutes in conversation with each other, and then we will go to our reporting out. So it's about 5:20, and we're going to come back at 5:40. Alex, to go around the room, and we're going to go group 2, 3, 4. And in 2 minutes, be very disciplined. Pick somebody who is either the facilitator, or the facilitator can designate somebody at the table to give like a recapitulation, like summarize, like what did you talk about, what was important in a very short time. And if somebody said something particularly salient, feel free to call them into your conversation.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to report out for Group 1, where we really spoke about 3 things. The first are, what are the values that should inform the water management moving forward in this area? And lots of things came up around this real value of taking care of the resources, centering restoration, acknowledging how connected we are, and to the sea pieces of it. Centering advice from kapunas and really looking towards ways to make water management fair and equitable. Those values sort of inform the vision then for what this catchment can look like. So you see those come through in ways to have the water resources be improving, not degrading, making sure that the people and the farmers, the taro farmers, have their water. That residents are prioritized in getting water and installing catchment systems. And then the last piece of it was, what are the practices and things that we need in order to achieve this vision? So here we really thought about 4 things. What are the educational components that can help us realize that vision? How do we make appropriate investments in infrastructure, things like upgrades and repairs, so there are fewer leaks? Who's doing the monitoring? This seemed bigger, but right, keeping an eye on the ditches. And then lastly, what are other ways to engage other stakeholders, right? So in addition to meetings, which people might be getting tired of meetings too, like what do we do for mail-ins or phone calls or deep conversations and dialogues? Anything else from my group? We have 27 seconds. Okay. Thank you very much.
Aloha. So we kind of deviated a little bit. Very passionate discussion on this table. Sorry. Am I looking at everybody? Sorry, I don't like my back towards people if I'm talking. But anyway, our question, which was group 1, now we're group 3, but it says, what oral history and memories are important for future generations to understand the significance of Ko'olau watershed? Well, we had a lot of discussion. I know I only got 2 minutes, okay. So as you can see here, talking about Mo'olelo, talking about our about this Ko'olau, which is so important to us. And our kupuna taught us, to take care of the land, right? I mean, we all know that, and it'll take care of you. But we're dealing with so many different issues right now with climate change, not having enough rainfall, which is not filling our streams, and then you still have diversion of those streams. There is no balance there. There is no balance in the water that's being taken and the water that's flowing down for the rest of us, you know, the Kama'aina that live here. But anyway, we need to educate. We need to ensure education, not for all people, but we have to start with our keiki. We have to get our keiki back on track, basically. What we learned, Sisi and I was talking about this, like how we grew up. We're kupuna now. I mean, we remember when we were kids and how we grew up and sharing tasks in cleaning opihi, cleaning the lo'i, malama, you know, the aina, and cleaning kalo, making poi, you know what I mean, go catch crab and cleaning crab. You know, those are things that we did together. And that was educating. That was education to us, but that was also fun. We were learning, but then that's what our kupuna taught us. You know, and there's a disconnect where we have lost that with our next generation. And yeah, maybe that's our fault too. But there's those outside distractions that interfere, you know. We live in a different time. But we need to engage with our keiki more. We need to get into the schools somehow, like educational process in the schools. If we can do that, that will be, I think, a good stepping stone to move forward. We all get it. We got it. But then we getting old. We're getting older, and we need the next generation to step up and continue this legacy and moving forward. Uncle Ed, you guys started something, you know, that we are appreciative, and we need to continue to fight, continue this fight. Yeah.
But I just want to say, I forgot to recognize Jill from Honopo. Honopo, mahalo. Their kupuna Lynn was courageous to stand up and fight for their vai. And they got 4 streams and rivers returned. Mahalo, Lynn.
Is it on? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, so we were, what is our question? Management and jobs. So for management and jobs, who should manage the Ko'olau watershed? And Ed started with, the elders, and the community needs to manage the resources. So Namoku, in conjunction with the water authority, is who should be managing the watershed. So when we talk about the specific jobs and the work tasks, Namoku has to have the capacity. It has to have the people to do this work, not just the work on the ground, but managing it. So all levels, right? And also has to coordinate with other agencies and for the whole Ko'olau. So that's a lot of people. That's a lot of capacity that's needed. We actually talked about specific numbers. So how many people would we need to actually take care of the whole watershed? So we said, okay, at least 100, right? At bare minimum, 100. And then how are we going to do that? Workforce development, bring in the young people. They do want to do the work if we can bring them in and give them those jobs. And there's so many young, smart people. We saw that during COVID when there was the funding for the jobs to take care of the watershed. And then we listed, like, who are those jobs? So supervisors, embedded resources in the community. So when you're talking about, like, the different, say, MISC or all these other agencies, as opposed to some group out there that has not that many resources and then they try to come in, actually have somebody here that's on the staff. And also, East Maui Water Authority, there should be a staff member who is here. And then we need lots of crews. We need crews for people on the ground to do the maintenance. We need crews of people who have science, technology, engineering, water experience, right? Water engineering. Invasive species crews like MISC type crews. Monitoring the water in the ditches. maintaining the roads, maintaining the ditches, permitting. What else do we have? And then people who collaborate. And then also just meters, the water meters, satellites. Say that again. Oh.
Yeah, so those are like a lot of the jobs, but then it was talking about the fact that, you know, some of that is from experience that you all have already had. And the other thing is, well, where would this happen? And I was told that the school just got the green light to move with the remodeling project. There's 5 acres there between the base where we had our site visit today and the school. Those could be like a combination of the project sites. The other thing that was mentioned is that there are existing jobs looking at the diversion canals now and working in them. That's EMI and the East Maui Watershed Partnership. So the Ahavai agency was in combination in partnership with Namoku should really replace those entities. That was part of like grounding the employment and the work for that. Within the canals as well, one other thing that was mentioned is that as far as the upcoming monitoring, that both Ahavai and Namoku should be part of that process that's going on now. And that the data for each watershed should be owned by the community of that watershed. It's not owned by an agency like at the county, but it's owned by the people. And then the other thing was about metering and making sure that the technology can almost immediately be put in place to be able to monitor and meter the water flows now. So that would be something like as soon as possible, as far as, you know, especially when you're looking at doing an environmental impact assessment and you notice that, oh, what does 100% really mean when there's a ditch that most of the water is still dropping into instead of the stream? So anyway, I'll stop there. Anyone else want to add?
A collaboration with people. It's going to take people to Malama, Aina, to Malama, the Ko'olau. And that's all of you who want to participate with us and the Water Authority. It can work because creating jobs is very important. We cannot do it alone. And we also have these facilities. Namoko is in charge of this place too. So housing or groups, here it is. It's right here. We have everything. All we need is you and wisdom. Thank you.
You. And what we talked about in this group is this notion of community benefits with the lens that, as Gina set the stage, includes actually considering whether or not the rate structure could be used to fund projects that the community feels are important, and in a way that is more expansive than you traditionally think of in a water system, but that could include areas, you know, beyond just that functional, the system being in a functional state. And the key thing that everybody at this table felt was vital and needed is to take control of the system and make it community centered. And even though that is not, you know, something that could be supported by just a rate structure or smaller investment, it's vital. And it's a project that really sits at the top and is a top priority. Secondary to that, Lolly shared a really profound notion that it's important to think about even incremental projects that turn the system into the breadbasket that it needs to be for communities. Really thinking about the nexus between water, food security, and the whole ecosystem of what it takes to support residents and communities in their lived experience. And then our discussion turned to not just saying what do we need to invest in, but really acknowledging with Moke and others, what are the preconditions and the things that you need to make sure that those investments like really do what we envision. And that included 3 things including thinking about planning and land use policy and really recognizing that we're seeing patterns of population shifting for a number of dynamics that are not just happening in East Maui, but really you need a whole of government approach to think about, particularly a dynamic of rural sprawl. Second, considering what it means and how important it could be to define regulatory and regulation capture and saying we need clarity around key terms that are going to guide policy. And then third, considering whether or not the role of the community beyond sort of on-the-spot engagement exercises, which are important, like this one, need to be formalized and institutionalized so that the community has an ongoing voice in decision-making throughout the entire juncture of vision to investment. And whether that could be in the form of a community advisory board that is permanent and that actually has some level of decision-making authority is a question we considered. Anything that I missed from this group? Thank you. So with that, thank you for all of your contributions. Thanks to Gina and her team. Please grab dinner, stay, because then we have a panel of experts who are going to tell you with the inspiring things we've heard in this room, how could you realize them? What are some of the strategies that come from other governments around the world, and even just inspired by your own remarks that we think could be helpful for a continuation of this conversation. But part of what we've prepared to do here is to bring together a panel of experts, and I won't introduce them. You can see them on the slide. In the interest of time, I'll ask them when they begin their remarks to share their background with you in the context of their presentations, to really think about multiple dimensions of what Gina and others in our conversations here today have inspired, which is how do we support you with lessons and strategies that are informed not just by the expert disciplines that are here in the room, but also with your aspirations and the lessons from the past that we've heard and really believe are important to hold in this community. And then as you craft a strategy, how do we make sure that the community and resident voice not only is centered, but really with authenticity and the awareness and respect for cultural heritage and indigenous practices. And particularly in looking at the motto of the new East Maui Water Authority, how can you think strategically and actually pay for the things that you need to be invested in now and in the future, and hold that aspiration of, what we've heard even today and throughout the day is important, which is control of the system, and really bringing that back to the community, and then the incremental steps that can bring you towards that hoped-for path. And as you see from my bio, which I'm not going to read, I'm also a teacher of this subject. I love this subject. I could talk about it all day, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to confine my remarks to 10 minutes so you can hear from these incredible experts. But part of what I'm going to do is really help you think about how do you resource the things that you are telling us are important, but in line with the work that we do as a nonprofit, which is saying it's not just about raising money, but funding your aspirations with a place-based lens as like the vital thing that we want to elevate in this conversation. So I can't resist. I'm going to start with a pop quiz because we love engagement. I'm going to show you a photo and I want you to think, what am I showing you and why is it relevant to what we're talking about today? Where is this? What's happening here? Anybody? And just shout out the answer if you think you know. A lake drying up. That could be a really good answer. Thank you, Lucienne. Anybody else? Anybody know where this could be? This could be anywhere, right? So what this photo represents is the city of Missoula, Montana. And what you're seeing here is a component of the natural assets that's similar to the city really held as important as part of their water system. And the Missoula, Montana water system is one that very much mirrors your context, where after seeing it go from investor to investor and the results of privatization feeling extractive, the city made a really bold step and said, we're going to take control. A process that began with community activism, community engagement, and realizing that by enlisting the support of a mayor who, in his own words, said, enough is enough, we really need to see our water system stop going from private investor hands to another hand that do not elevate what the community believes matters. This was a long journey. And for more than 100 years, that utility really had not, in private ownership, delivered upon the community outcomes that were important. And then in 2017, after a long campaign, things changed. And the way that things changed is a story that we want you to hold as aspirational for the following reasons. Because it didn't happen overnight, it happened through incremental steps, and it included blending and braiding a number of public finance approaches that you think often exist in a vacuum, including using powers of eminent domain, rethinking how they were using general fund appropriations to fund not just system improvements, system needs, but also a broader vision and North Star, and also thinking about changing the configuration of private investment, holding that private investors are gonna be important, but you need to bring them in a different way if you want different results after you make the really hard choice. And it's a system that continues to thrive since 2017. And with more time, we would go into more. But with the question that I'm going to ask you to engage in dialogue and thinking with me over the next 7 to 6 minutes now or so is, how can you leverage the opportunities around you to do something that's possibly similar if that is your aspiration? And also, what are some of the incremental steps that could be important in other areas that feel like they could be unrelated to this golden North Star of control of the system that are really vital to achieve the other things you've told us are important? And as always, I don't want to presuppose that anybody knows what this whole area of public finance is. It's hard. It can be really boring, I will acknowledge. But if you were to walk away with, like, what is this, and you've never heard about it, it's nothing more than how government raises and spends money. Any government, including governments that, as we're talking about, are set up as functional units and departments like the East Maui Authority, to the state, the county, and others. And if you hold this very simple definition in mind, I'm going to walk you through, like, what's the next important thing that if you've never heard about this, you might want to know. So this chart, I believe, shows the entire universe of what you can do from a public finance strategy standpoint, not just as the authority, as the county, as the state of Hawaii, but any government in the whole world can look at this chart and all of their avenues are summarized. Now, and of course, I'm cheating because there's a square called other, but I'm going to walk you through what they mean. You can, when you say, how do we pay for that thing that we think matters, whatever it might be, big or little, you're either going to do something called pay as you go. Who's heard of that term? Raise your hand. It's you, just as the name implies, you pay for something as you go on the project. You pay for it with real cash, with money in the bank of the government. You don't build loans and liabilities. You just use the money that you have. It can be a really prudent way to spend money, but also limiting, because guess what? If you don't have enough money for all your priorities, and this is your approach, you're confined. And there's also a little something called, what if nobody appropriates money because there's too many priorities, appropriation risk. Second strategy, municipal bonds, notes, and other lending instruments. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of that. It's creating a future liability. You're raising money today from investors, pledging something as repayment that is part of the government revenue base, as a promise that, guess what, for 30 years, this is the investment, it matters, it's intergenerational, it's there, it can have components of equity, and it can really help you resource big projects quickly, but carries consequences. Land-based financing and value capture, who's heard of that? Nobody? One person. Think about land as your biggest and best resource. And the question that land value capture asks you to think about is, are we using it in service of what we need? Are we leaving money on the table, especially where we have thriving real estate development and markets? Who is benefiting from that? And should we flip that equation? And it's not just one thing, it's a family of instruments within public-private partnerships. Who's heard of that? You've all lived it if you know Mahipono, right? It's where you commit to, as a government, for multiple years via contract to share risk and the opportunity around 5 ingredients: to design, build, operate, maintain, finance, something together with a private company. And we've all seen the history of that can be not so easy, to put it in mild terms. And then, has anybody heard of foundation program related foundation program related investments and grants? So possibly some of you, this is when you bring in the philanthropic sector, either in grants where they just give you money, or where you actually partner with them to become a social investor in your community, an area that's really emergent and presents a whole host of opportunity. So because I'm down to 1 minute, once you know the universe of those approaches, the question is, this is like a 3-part step. If we're baking a pie, I'd say these are our ingredients to get towards that baked good. First, you want to think, just as we did today, like, what matters? What are the long-term priorities? And do you have an inventory of the assets of the system that needs support so that they continue to be in good repair? And then, like, what are those other things that are not water-related that matter? Like, you're really thinking about the breadbasket of this community, food security, and other areas. Second, you're going to want to say, but whose job is it to do and fund those things? because that turns upon a phrase that's a little complex called the framework of fiscal governance. When you look at the configuration of stakeholders and their powers, as we're going to talk about, Gina alluded to, who has the money and the legal obligation or the authority to be expansive and do those things? And then the third component is, once you've done those two, where can the money come from, and have you thought about every arrow in your quiver? Do you understand the consequences also that a plan of finance can undo equity outcomes, indigenous rights outcomes? And it's just as important to not just think about what the project's going to do, but how the money comes together. And those are even harder questions. So the example, this just gives you a little bit of what you probably already know, sort of how Article 8, Chapter 19 of the revised charter sets you up to really understand the authority of the East Maui Water Authority vis-a-vis separate from the Department of Water Supply, and how a vital piece of this that we really believe is going to be a linchpin towards getting to your North Star in different ways we can talk about is Section 819.6, where the power to establish that regional water system fund is so important and will create opportunities to really think about the rate structure differently, but also this notion of how could community benefits create an incremental ladder towards the North Star, and so many ancillary things that are vital. And before I run out of time, I'll say, how could you think through this in an example of something we even heard today might be important to fund beyond system improvements, but this notion of the breadbasket, linking together another community vision that it not a water project, but vital to the community, and thinking this is a signal towards ownership and community well-being that really matters here. And if we only did pay as you go, right, which is a preferred method, you just spend money as you have, and you might be limited in how you could resource just what we talked about this evening. But if you were more expansive, you could say, what if we combine pay as you go with a lending vehicle and a foundation program related investment? What might we do? Well, I won't have time to go over all of this, but Macon-Bibb County, Georgia was facing a challenge like you were, not in the water context, but through COVID-19, and they said, rather than just taking money that we have and using it to fund food security, let's actually create a revolving loan fund that creates opportunities for communities to come in and have agency like micro-entrepreneurs and actually address food insecurity, blight, food deserts, and affordable housing. And they did this not on their own, but they brought in a foundation, not as a grant maker, well, as a grant maker, but also as a social investor to really create a vehicle that in perpetuity would provide money for the community to do this at a low interest cost, and also bringing in a sector that often lives outside of public finance, community investment through community development, financial institution, mission-based lenders. If this is an idea that interests you, we can talk about it more. We can certainly stay here longer than after our panel ends. But part of what I hope to impart if we have more time is really thinking that when you just look at one thing in the way you've done it, there's a different way to expand the configuration to give you more agency, more resources, and also to think, could you layer in a community participatory process where people tell you how to spend a portion of that money and what really matters to them is a continuous part of the financing conversation. So with that, we'll leave you with some key questions that we think you want to ask to get towards your North Star that could help you really tease and uncover other things that you're not doing. But I want to make sure that I preserve time for our next presenter, who in an equal short 8 to 10 minutes will share a little bit of how do we not just spend money, but also think about the realization of indigenous and cultural heritage really living as a part of the equation. Dr. Chief?
Thank you to all my relatives here for allowing me to be here. I am Bitterwater, born for near the water, and I'm from the Navajo Nation. And today I want to share a few examples of work that I've been doing in tribal communities on water. And Toi Inate, which means water is life. I think we all share that common philosophy amongst our indigenous people. And I grew up with Dene as my primary language, with the foundation of my culture and tradition. And that's what motivates me to do the work that I do today. And my family live within the Peabody Coal Company leasehold area. And we have experienced a lot of impacts from coal mining. And from that experience really drives the work that I do. I'm the director of the Indigenous Resilience Center, where we believe that the solutions lie within the community. Centering their traditional knowledges and community-driven solutions, they are the one that can lead towards sustainability and build that future for our young people. And so we work with community champions, leaders, tribal leaders, and tribal colleges to do this type of work, and also training up the next generation of young people. So I'm really excited to hear some of the solutions about workforce development. And we believe in indigenous resilience because you know, our worldview of Mother Earth and how we live sustainably is really embedded in our identity and our culture. And so when we talk about disaster reduction or climate vulnerability, for us, it's more about how resilient we are and the solutions that we hold. And that's embedded in our sovereignty, our cultural values, our livelihoods, subsistence practices, but also it connects to our culture, language, our nationhood, and that makes us resilient to any kind of perturbation that we face. And so I share this definition from an Australian Aboriginal scholar about Indigenous resilience. But we'll share the slides with you, and you can read more about that. I work a lot with water challenges with tribes and using Indigenous frameworks. And the frameworks we want to use are given from the people. They lead the way, and they have that problem solving. So we feel that in order to reach community healing, restoration, it has to come from our Indigenous people who own the data, who govern the data, and they use it for themselves. They have ownership. And that's really embedded in the idea of 7 generations model, which is planning for 7 generations into the future with the knowledge of 7 generations before us, which is our ancestors. And we aim to build partnerships. We work to gain community approval, co-produce those solutions, disseminate that knowledge, and then give back to our people to empower them. There are principles around this called Indigenous data sovereignty and based on fair care principles. But I just want to give some examples. One that came about with the COVID, how COVID amplified food, energy, and water insecurities on the Navajo Nation. And the community oversees all that data, and they have governance and rights for that data through a data MOU. And so that data cannot be shared unless it's approved by the community. And so you, as a community, have that right to do that. And it's a matter of writing it down and making sure that people who come in, or if you collect the data, that it follows that data, Indigenous data governance protocol. And during that time, we were able to build a water GIS portal, which is used by the tribal environmental leaders and water users, but also that there's other data sets that are hidden and only certain people can access it. For example, I have another project with Springs database, and for that work, we monitor who can access that data, and it's only for the benefit of the people. So when Western people look at us, they just think of water as a utilitarian use, but for us, water is life. Water is what gives us spirit and sustain us. For us as the Net people, we don't use water just for recreation. We use it for spiritual purposes, cultural livelihoods, subsistence practices like agriculture, ranching, hunting, medicinal culture. So in this example, we were able to categorize over 40 different types of uses. And this was very useful, not just for understanding how people use the river, but also for fighting for water rights, for fighting for protection, for advocacy. And so by doing this type of quantification that is only available to the people, the community was able to use this to do testimonies for the state of New Mexico regarding a spill that occurred. And so data is really helpful in that sense for advocacy, but yet the data is also protected by the people that own that data. Also wanted to share some examples of plans that are set within the community where it's set within their worldview. And these are just a list of tribal plans where the tribe set out to make a plan that's within their governance structure, within their worldview, their values. And so it is already being done out there, and so you can do that as well. And I worked a long time with the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe on their lake and how their lake was getting impacted by climate change and overuse. They're at the very end of the Truckee River water system. And so we used this participatory model, which is much like what you did today, where you work together, you collaborate, you discuss, you develop those management plans, and then think about different scenarios that you can consider in doing this management plan. But when a Western person looks at us as community, they look at it from the scientific view. But really, this is an example for the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe where it was very simple in terms of how climate change was going to impact their lake. But for the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe, they said, no, we have more to add to this. So just by contributing their own knowledge and leading that effort, the plan was more comprehensive. So it's really important that we also collaborate, but that the community drives it and leads it within their epistemology, their worldview, and cultural values. So we're still here, we're still resilient, and thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Katie Hansen. I'm a member of the Public Finance Initiative team and really honored to be with you tonight. Right, so tonight I'm going to draw on some examples from my work in water resource management in South Africa and in the US to think about a couple of tools and practices that help us put these values into practice, right? And a lot of great examples are already happening here. So this is a prime example of really engaging meaningfully with the community. And I'm also going to talk about a tool to address power imbalances, which is power mapping. And then lastly, some ideas about how to maintain mechanisms to be transparent and accountability to push these values forward. And just to set the table a little bit, I think it can be overwhelming in water resource management because we know that there are so many different parties and actors that hold some part of the decision making. This is often in the political science world described as this three-layer cake where we have decision-making power that is across jurisdictions. There's the watershed, there's the county, there's the state, right? And functions and sectors, which means that no single actor, right, has the capacity on their own to come up with the solutions. And therefore, we have to have this collaborative governance framework where we're working together to reach decisions, hopefully that bring our mutual benefit. But that really requires very clear visioning processes and then engaging in these practices around meaningful engagement and addressing the power imbalances amongst those different stakeholders and being transparent and accountable to ourselves to bring these into fruition. And the collaboration can get really slowed down, this piece of like, we need to work together, but often that stalls out right, because of the lack of trust. We can only progress at the speed of trust, right? And that when there isn't, that because of historical regions of actors that may have acted poorly in the past, or a lack of information, a lack of access to where the decision making happened, that can slow us down. And so I think committing to this idea that moving forward, right, there will be nothing about us without us, right? That's kind of central principle of environmental justice, is to think about who's in these rooms and how are they involved to put these values into practice. Right, so engaging meaningfully, I think the piece here that's a nice pull out are when we think about who is affected by the decision, they need to have a say in the decision, right? Are they involved in not only the decision that's being made, but the process that the decision was reached? And it can be so demoralizing to be asked to engage and then not know how does that actually influence the decision. So I think the onus is on organizations like a watershed authority to be really clear up front about here's the process that we understand moving forward and what we'll do with this information tonight, right? Or as we ask for your feedback in surveys and mail-ins, right? We're working collectively. Gina did a great job at this today, right? We're working collectively towards building a plan. And here are the values we're trying to center in the plan. And we're going to take the information that we put up on all of these sticky note boards and start to build that into the plan that we create. There's some practical logistics here, which I think you're all also doing really well. This is an example of the U.S. Water Alliance engaging in Lynchburg, South Carolina, but thinking through just really practically, when is the meeting? Where is the meeting? Who is the messenger? Is the information getting out there? Is there childcare? Is there transportation? Is the materials that are provided accessible and jargon-free? So I think a checklist can be really helpful in that case, right? That you've just, as you start to do these community meetings and think through pieces, taking care of those practicalities so there's easy on-ramps into the engagement can be helpful. Okay, addressing power imbalances. So this comes from, clearly we know of the actors in this watershed and in watershed resource management in general. Actors have different amount of resources, different amount of decision-making authorities, different amount of knowledge, and can use that to push for the certain values that they want to bring into fruition. And the questions can be, how do we work through these power imbalances after naming them directly? I think it can be helpful to try to whittle down from these broad goals from what we want to accomplish into some more specific targets and tactics so that there are short-term wins and gains that we can actually see right as we build towards this longer-term future. And so it's a sort of a standard prescription in some ways to think through, once we have these broad goals, really thinking through in that multi-layered cake, who's our target here? Who has the authority to grant us what we want? And what do we need to do tactically? What are the steps that we can take to influence that target? What are the resources that we have? What are the resources we need to get there? And then this piece will dig into for the remainder of my presentation about who are our allies and opponents, right? Who's with us on this journey, who's against us in this journey, and what can we do to understand their position and maybe shift some of that. In that, I'll say this, again, the more we can make this accessible and visual and to play into scenarios, it can help us to imagine that vision and get down into those tactics. So this is work we did in South Africa. It draws on Bruce Langford's work, where there's a river basin game. This photo's a little bit cut off, but you're looking at allocation pieces, and there's various fields, right? You can imagine probably into taro fields and lime plantations, but right where you're thinking, right, we have so much water. How do we want to allocate them? And to really think through with marbles, right, into taro fields, this is where the water's going, right? And what happens in climate change, right? If we had 500 marbles last year, there's only 350 moving forward. And it's a way that scenario planning can really help us all collectively get on the same page about what is that collective vision that we're working towards. All right, and the last tool that I'll leave you with is this notion of a power map. Have people seen this before? So what's down on the bottom here is what's the level of support, right? And you have active allies that are really supporting what you're trying to get to, what's that target and the tactics that you want to achieve. And then on the other side, you have strong opponents. And on this y-axis, it's how much power do they have, right? How much control do they have over this? Low levels of power or high levels of power? Is this something people have seen before? Few, yeah, all right. So then what can happen, and I think before we move on, think about a target of something that you'd like to see, right, in this watershed. And then let's spend a minute just thinking about, okay, who are our allies? Can everybody think of an ally for their target? Who's with you? The Sierra Club's with us. Great, okay? And who's a strong opponent? We don't necessarily have to lay this out, but right, there's some people that are maybe not with us yet. And so in this exercise, you start to place these people on a map. You can do this visually, right, on these big cards with Post-it notes, right? And we've got Sierra Club, and then we think, okay, the Sierra Club, how much power do they have, right? Would we say they have relatively low amount of power? They might have a lot of power, more resources. So we're going to stick the Sierra Club somewhere here. Who are our opponents and how much power do they have? And then this is, and I'm going to leave you with my very favorite thing from all of water resource management, is there's two ways to then make progress towards your goals, right? One is you can take your allies and think about how do we get them more power? Would, right, more visibility and resources help the Sierra Club reach more people? And then we're going to increase our progress towards our goal by increasing the power of the Sierra Club. The second piece, and I think this is even more optimistic almost, is we can think about who's against us, right? And is there a way, who could we target or work with to just bring them a little bit closer, right? We don't have to get them all the way over to an active supporter, but if we could take them from being a strong opponent to somebody who's just like a little bit more neutral, that actually is going to really help our cause. The other thing we can do is try to think about, are there ways we can reduce their power? Can we pull back some of that decision-making authority into what we do? So I love this power mapping. I think it's really helpful in clarifying, right, from that broad vision down into these tactics. And with that, I will hand this over to Andrew. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Thank you all. It's been just a wonderful day. I'm going to remember this for a long time, and just incredible hospitality and wonderful conversations. So thanks again for having us. Andrew Simmons, and for those of you I didn't meet, I have a background in urban planning and working as a social scientist. A lot of my work has been in the urban planning and climate resilience spaces, and trying to achieve sort of integrated approaches to planning. A lot of what you've heard from the previous speakers is about community-driven approaches to, in this case, to water management and the case study I'm going to be presenting is a project I worked on with an environmental NGO, a London-based UK environmental NGO with an Australian water utility, a publicly owned water utility that's called Hunter Water. And there are some clear differences that just in terms of comparison. Oh, I'm sorry, thanks. Comparison with Hunter Water and in terms of scale, obviously geography that I should just flag, but and also that some of the examples I'm going to be presenting as a representative of integrated water management approaches, just with strategic planning processes, are not can't necessarily entirely be accurately described as totally community driven, but that it I think fairly can represent how the advantages of a strategic planning approach with community-driven processes as part of this bigger picture, and that's what I'm hoping to share with you, and probably to catalyze some conversations around that further on. I wanted to say actually just so I'll explain later where Hunter Water is and everything. It's in the state of New South Wales in Australia. But all of the documents in New South Wales, government documents, and as well as for the water utility for Hunter Water, start with an acknowledgement of country. And I'll read this. We acknowledge the traditional countries and it names 5 of the Aboriginal peoples, and the countries in which we operate and beyond where our water flows. We recognize and respect the cultural heritage, beliefs, and continuing connection to the lands and waters of its traditional custodians, and pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. And also there's so a lot of the Hunter Water works with a lot of the Aboriginal and Indigenous groups with the community. So as you'll see with some of the working groups that I'm going to show you, that there's that representation, but also if you go back, that actually that they try to continually reference this and embed this in all of the planning documents and as a starting point for the conversations. And that's something that just started, from my understanding, in the early 2000s through government legislation that was through community-driven processes within New South Wales government and with Hunter Water. So it was not necessarily a gesture on Hunter Water's point, but through eventual legislation, and I just wanted to share that, and it might be something to think about to raise awareness as you all go forward, and including just showing in this case the Hunter Water's area of operations with traditional boundaries overlaid, and you can see this consistently throughout a lot of the documents. And next slide, please. Yeah, so again, in terms of scale, it's much larger. I have to just flag that, serving about 530,000 people. It's said that Hunter Water represents in the Hunter Valley region of New South Wales, so it's quite north of Sydney, on the they call it the Gold Coast, is a microcosm of the Australian economy with mining, there's the wine country, there's tourism, there's lots of conservation areas, and so there's a lot going on, and it's a fascinating area. And this is showing just an artist rendering of the catchment area. So generally, urban water services in Australia are recognized internationally actually today for delivering efficiency and productivity and security of their supply, as well as for now, upholding environmental standards. But this actually hasn't always been the case, and there have been a series of reforms really since 1994 up until 2014, and there were 2 phases of these reforms that led to that. And I think I'll probably hone in on that more in tomorrow's presentation that we have, and skip over some of those details now. But no, go back though, please. Sorry, but still, just to summarize that this first phase of the reforms for that Hunter Water, and as well as other water authorities in Australia, notably Sydney Water, that today are considered to be good practices and studied by British water authorities and even like the World Bank and just in terms of sound management practices with a public ownership model. But it started with a separation of responsibilities, and with one of the key drivers being water scarcity, and something that's very familiar to water authorities of having competing uses for limited water resources, familiar tale. And then the second phase was really from 2004 for a decade until 2014 in response to drought. Which led to and this is what primarily led to the adoption of integrated water resource management approaches that I'm going to be sharing. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just to touch on some of the, I'm going to be just sharing like, what is, so our work helped inform with lots of people, other groups involved, the security, ultimately was the security plan and the sustainability plan for underwater. And at first it was daunting to come in and to have all sorts of working groups, and I mean, of course, very important, but it was just fascinating because there were just so many established working groups with universities and student groups that were already in place that then we had to collaborate with. And so some examples, there's a nominations and governance committee which oversees the continuing professional development of Hunter Waters directors necessary to improve their skills and knowledge with respect to sustainability areas. The investment committee, pretty self-explanatory. Audit and risk committee, likewise self-explanatory. The people and culture committee monitors culture, capability, and development of Hunter Waters people, including in response to emerging sustainability trends, challenges, and opportunities. And all of and these committees then all had living documents that then would report to the Hunter Waters board, and that would then approve the sustainability strategy. The next slide, please. So, and it's important to say that what ended up being the case, and is often not the case, is that this is a dynamic process, and so it's not just a matter of different consulting firms coming in and then delivering a PDF, a report that just sits on a shelf, and how do you actually make a living document that's continually updated, on a dynamic basis. That's often a challenge, and this was something, again, that when we were, so I don't want to dwell on the work that we did, but we were looking at scenario planning of climate modeling and risk assessments, and to inform what ended up being the visioning process for the security plan and sustainability plan later on. But a lot of this was already in place with, so for example, that there was values, customer experience, safety, and sustainability, digital strategy, community engagement, et cetera. And then next slide, please. And so there was a series of what were, our environmental consulting firm would lead drivers of change, and these are the examples for Hunter Water of some drivers of change, of looking out in a long-term horizon of all the different pressures and dynamics at play, and these examples here include increasing environmental and social challenges, so like water security, biodiversity loss, intergenerational equity, a growing region, so like some places that there already are at present acute development pressures, and in some places, perhaps here, that's something that's more gradual, but such pressures, as I certainly heard throughout the day, remain, and a more variable climate, increasing expectations and regulations, navigating uncertainty and complexity, and next slide, please. And this is just the last slide, actually. And so examples of guide rails of part of this of the security plan and sustainability plan include to delivering commercial value, trusted relationships, learning with First Nations wisdom, planning for future generations, listening and doing, and digital transformation. I had hoped to have time to hone in on 3 of these, especially the trusted relationships part, the planning for future generations, and learning with First Nations wisdom, but you'll be left with the slides that have examples where you can find more information on sort of tangible examples of what that entails, and there could be some transferable lessons, I trust, there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. We know that we're about 10, 15 minutes over time, so we really appreciate your kind attention. We would be delighted to stay and take as many of your questions as you'd like, but we're also respectful of Gina closing us out for anybody who might need to leave, and we'll just show you that with the PowerPoint, you'll be getting the resources and links to this and a lot more information that we hope to discuss and bring into the conversation that we think could help you on the road towards achieving your aspirations. And just want to thank you for not only hearing and being receptive, but also teaching us as much as you have today. So thank you. And Gina, I'll leave it to you to close, but then we're happy to take questions because we have time.
No question over here.
It's just, are you guys gonna provide links or something where we can access some of the materials?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything, and you know, Gina will tell folks like where to get that, but absolutely. Lourdes? Dr. Chief?
Dr. Chief, yeah. I have, I don't know. Anyway, I was just talking with Hannah, who works with the Maui Economic Development Board, about the census. In your communities, have you had struggles, or like not struggles, but what is the conversation around like accessing data for the U.S. Census, and is that data like relevant to you getting funding, and just how does that work in your tribal areas?
Yes, we do work with the U.S. Census when we're looking at socioeconomic factors that may be correlating to food, energy, and water insecurities, and then also adding additional data that we collect, like for example, different types of water uses for infrastructure, water for spiritual purposes, and so forth, and also doing surveys, different types of other data collection that can add on to the census, because the census a lot of times is not accurate in indigenous communities because they don't capture the full picture of that community. So we want to be able to add on to that data to have a better characterization of the needs that will really help advocate for water rights, sovereignty, and be able to get food, energy, and water securities.
Have you come across a situation maybe where census data doesn't map to what you collect through community partnerships? For example, population estimates.
Yeah. Some, for example, with the Navajo Nation, they have different, what would be, I would say, like data related to household data regarding water infrastructure at the home level. That often doesn't fit the real data because the way that the census collects that data is not really characterizing the home. Like sometimes they'll only collect data for if they actually have a site visit. So only if they visit that home will that home be included in the whole demographic data. So there's a lot of data that is lacking, and also the community defines their own geography that won't align with what the census tracts have. So that's where the misalignment would be as well. So we might have to rethink the geographies that the communities define, not what the U.S. government defines.
Did we see another hand? Yes, Lucienne?
What your role is, after these meetings? Are you hoping to be consultants or something to the water authority? Or is this just an educational process for the water authority to understand like some of the tools that they could use along the way of, helping the community regain more say over their water resources?
Yeah, so great question. So our intention when we show up and do programs like this, which we do pro bono as a nonprofit, is to help and educate and inspire, and to really think, how will Gina and you and other stakeholders use what you learned to catalyze action and practice changes that are different? And we consider our job done if you're curious enough to learn more and are here as a trusted, completely independent voice that really just cares about your community and your outcomes. Other questions? If not, I'll give Gina the mic, and we will still hang around for great conversations.
Well, I just want to extend my thank you for coming out and for all the help you folks have just given me, and inspiration too. And I know the community too. If we could just give them a hand. It's so nice to feel like you have somebody on your side, really. And I just wanted to close out tonight and just say that we've doubled from 2 to 4 people. So I hope to be able to come out more and have a presence. I know community meetings aren't always the best place to engage, and I'm working with them on understanding better how to not make it a burden for the communities to say what they want. And we do have the board too. So when you see them out, feel free to share your thoughts with them, and they can bring it into the board meetings. But if I see you at a community meeting or in town, just stop me. My phone number's on the internet too. You can call our office, but I'm always willing to talk to people, and I'll try to make more of a presence. And my ultimate goal is to partner with this community and have employees out here and have a base so that we really are physically present and physically helping the community. So with that, thanks everybody for tonight, and I hope to see you. Hui ho.